In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the use of the embedded functions of Microsoft Excel for the multiplication of matrices and the computation of the inverse of a matrix. You notice on this sheet I have defined three matrices across the top of the sheet. Matrix A on the left, matrix B in the center, and matrix C on the right. In order to multiply matrix A times matrix B, we need to know the dimensions of the product. I assume you know how to compute that dimension. So simply state that the product of a 3 by 3 matrix is a 3 by 3 matrix. So I select an area of 3 by 3, and that's where Excel will place the product of matrix A times matrix B. And then in the function bar, I place an equal sign, which says I'm going to enter a formula. And the function that will compute matrices is named mmult. So I enter mmult, open parentheses, and you notice it is asking you for two arrays or two matrices. The first array is the first matrix you want to multiply, so you select it, and you notice Excel placed in there the upper left-hand corner, a comma, and the lower right-hand corner. That is how Excel denotes a matrix. That's the first one I want to use. I put a comma, and now I will select the second matrix, which would be matrix B. It too is denoted with the F2 in the upper left and H4 in the lower right. Close that off with a parentheses. But instead of simply entering enter, I need to tell Excel it's a matrix multiplication. So I hold down the shift key, hold down the control key, and press enter. And Excel computes those two according to the internal algorithm for multiplication matrix and places the results in the appropriate cells in the product. And you can see there is our product of A times B. Well, I'm going to do that once again for you, but before I do that, I want you to note something. Okay? When I selected matrix A, and in Excel placed the element that was in row 1, column 1 of that matrix, placed it in the function bar. But if you notice, just to the left of that function bar, you see the name MAT capital A. What I did before I started this video, is I named that matrix, matrix A, and I gave it the name of MATA. This is quite useful if you have a very large matrix. Excel allows you to put in matrices that are 256 by 256, which is an extremely large matrix. And I don't think you particularly want to have to highlight that every time you want to use it in a computation. So I would recommend that you select that matrix and name it so that you save yourself a lot of work. Okay? Well, let me now multiply matrix A times matrix C. Well, we know the product will be a 3 by 3, so I select the 3 by 3 matrix and go to the function bar and enter, and I'm going to use mmult, multiplication matrix. But instead of giving you selecting A, I'm simply going to give it its name, MAT A. And Excel knows what that is from its definition, comma, and then I select matrix C. Close the parentheses, hold down Control, Shift, Enter, and there's my product of A times C. I left it there because I wanted you to see that you can mix in mmult, or any function in Excel, a name that defines the appropriate element for one of the arguments, or you can use its designation in cells. But before I leave, I want to show you how I named matrices. Okay? In order to do that, I highlight the matrix that I want to name. In this case, let's call it matrix C. And then I go to the formula bar and select it, and in there I will find an option that says define name. If I click it, it opens a window and asks me for the name I want to define. Here I want to call it matrix C. Then asks, where do you want this, what do you scope of this to be? Do you want it to be in the entire workbook? Do you want it to be just on sheet 1, just on sheet 2, or just on sheet 3? Well, I'm going to leave it as the default full workbook, which means that on any workbook on this sheet, once I've defined the matrix, I simply have to refer to it. I don't have to find it and select it. When I say OK, you will now see that the name now appears to the left of the very left of the function bar. So now I can perform multiplications by simply referring to the matrix. You're not just limited to 2 matrices, you actually multiply 3 of them, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay? But first you need to know that a 3 by 3 matrix times a 3 by 3 matrix will produce a 3 by 3 matrix, and then multiply it by a 3 by 3 matrix will yield a 3 by 3 matrix. And so the product of those 3 matrices will be 3 by 3. So I select a 3 by 3 area where I want that product to go. Okay? And I first will enter into the command bar mmult, and I'll multiply matrix A times matrix B as my first product. But now, in order to now multiply it by C, I'm now going to say, I'm going to let what is already there be the first argument. So over here, I'm going to enter, just in front of the mmult that is there, I'm going to enter mmult again, open parand, and now the previous multiplication is now the first array that is requested. So at the end of the list, I place my comma, and now I want to tell it the third one I want to multiply is matrix C. Of course, I could have selected as well to just denote it. Okay. Again, Control Shift Enter, and I've got my product. Let's check to make sure that that worked correctly, because here I already have A times B. So if I could take this matrix and multiply it by matrix C, then I certainly would have the product of A times B times C. So let's do that. Let's take the 3 by 3 area I want the product to go. I'm going to use mmult. Too many M's. The first matrix I want to select is A times B, which has already been performed, comma, and then I'm going to multiply by matrix C. Control Shift Enter, and there's my product, and sure enough, there my 2 matrices are the same. Lastly, I want to demonstrate the use of another function that Excel has for operations on matrices, and that is for computing the inverse. And I'm going to compute the inverse of matrix A. I know that the inverse of matrix A will be a 3 by 3 matrix, so I select the area I want Excel to place it. And as you might have guessed, the function for inverse of a matrix is M for matrix inverse. Okay. Open parand, and it is asking for an array, and the array it wants me to give them is the array that I want to find the inverse of. So I select matrix A, close up the parand, Control Shift Enter, and there is the inverse. Okay? Let me do that again with inverse B. So let's find the inverse of B, and we know it will be a 3 by 3 matrix. And so we go M inverse, open parand, select B, close the parand, Control Shift Enter, and there's the inverse of B. Let's check to make sure indeed that is the inverse of B. We know that the inverse of B times the inverse of B should be the identity matrix. So let's multiply inverse B times B and find out what its product is. It should be the identity matrix. So we will say M mult. We want to select inverse of B, comma, B, close parand, Control Shift Enter, and there we have the inverse. Well, something that looks very close to the inverse, but as you notice, these are decimals, and Excel actually has many more that it doesn't display to you. But you do know that the ones that do appear, negative e to the negative 16th, is a 1 with 16 zeros in front, 15 zeros in front of it. This one is a 4 with 17 zeros in front of it. So it's extremely close to 0. And so we have the identity matrix, 1 on the left, the major diagonal, and zeros elsewhere. This concludes this video.